G'day, I'm Brian Smith, best known as the founder of that great UGG brand, the sheepskin boots that are so comfortable. And coming up, I'm going to be on Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty show, and we're going to talk about a whole range of things that you'll never learn in business school and never read in a business book. We're going to talk about loyalty, we're going to talk about leadership, we're going to be talking about overcoming incredible odds, how to hang in there through the tough times, and how to just win by persevering.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneurial magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be looking at what it takes to move a brand that no one has ever heard of and grow it into a multi-million-dollar international business. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful that Inc.com made us the #1 podcast to make you a better leader, and G&A cited us in the top 10 podcasts for HR pros and employers. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching or listening to this show, you are either a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or a leader in some capacity. And as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you can tell yourself that the odds are against you. And maybe you've got some very good reasons that it seems that way. But what is it that makes some people come through those odds to come to the top? Is it luck, or is it something else altogether? And how do you lead through the adversity of those kinds of challenges? Well, our guest today is Brian Smith. No, not the Brian Smith you went to school with, the guy with the twitchy eye, not him. No, Brian Smith, who's on our show today, is the founder of the world-famous UGG Australia Brand. You remember those UGG boots that some reason hot girls wear in the summer? Like, I can't imagine how stinky their feet would be, but that's just me. Hey, it's my thoughts on it. Today, Brian is one of the most sought-after international business leaders in the country. He's committed to teaching entrepreneurs how to leverage their most precious assets from within and to recognize and pursue their passions and create fulfilling and successful life. Brian is the author of the book, The Birth of a Brand, Launching Your Entrepreneurial Passion and Soul. He is a sought-after keynote speaker and a mentor to small business owners across the US and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome, not the twitchy eye, but the actual Brian Smith.
Well, good day, Dov.
G'day, mate. It's good to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And of course, you and I have chatted off air, and I didn't know at the time until we started chatting. But of course, we come from the same place. I mean, you're actually originally from there, but I lived there before I moved to North America, which is Perth, Western Australia. I think you're my first guest from Perth. I've had lots of Aussies, but not Perth.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very different world, and now we both live on the West Coast.
Yes.
And so, it's very interesting for me. Do you find that there's a cultural connection between those West Coasts, like West Coast Australia and the West Coast of North America? Is there a certain psychological mentality similarity, do you think?
Yes, it retains the wild, wild West, attitude. Like the people who came to California early on were, explorers and, the freedom lookers, and the same happened in Perth, Australia.
Yeah.
The Western Australia is a real wild bunch of from their perspective, Perth is the center of the universe.
Absolutely. Well, it is a different country than the rest of Australia. Economically, culturally, it's very different. It's a very different place. Now, you now live in Southern California, as you said, and you surf and you do all the things that are very traditional Australian, living in a sunny climate. But part of what drives you is your contribution to humanity. Tell us a little bit about that before we even get into the UGG brand. I want to sort of give people about how you're doing that. How are you driven to contribute to humanity?
Well, for the longest time, I mean, I was late teens, early 20s, I always had this passion, not a passion, it was just a thought in the back of my mind that I'd love to leave the planet better off than I found it, when I die. And that sort of is, culminated into a lot of different service opportunities. But by far the most rewarding is when I speak from stage, and the topics that I talk about, which come from my book, are so meaningful to the attendees that I invariably get 2, 3, 4 people come up and say, oh my God, Brian, I was about to give up my business this week, and now I understand where I'm at in the cycle, and thank you so much. And that is so fulfilling. And so that right now is one of my higher forms of service. I've done other things like coaching San Diego State rugby team for 5 years to the national title. That was fabulous service, but not nearly as rewarding as helping people's lives change. That's really cool.
Well, what you just talked about there, you brought up something which is, people saying to you, I was about to give up my business. And I know that you had to lead through adversity with your own company. But let's sort of go back a little bit further than that, because you graduated in 1978 as a chartered accountant.
Right.
Then you were those accountant and entrepreneur seem, in most people's minds, to be mutually exclusive. But then you went to California looking for the next big opportunity to bring back to Australia. What sort of, how did you go from that very, to use a stereotype, bean counter mentality to the entrepreneurial mentality of going to somewhere like California to look for an opportunity?
Sure. Well, I think in fairness, I never liked accounting. I never was that mentality. I just happened to choose that because, I didn't have a clue what to do after high school, and I didn't have a college entrance pass. So, my mother said, what do all your father's friends do? And I thought of the guy who had the Mercedes and the biggest house. And he said, oh, he's a chartered accountant. So I said, okay, that's what I'll do, not having a clue that he may have inherited all that. So anyway, after 10 years, it took 10 years for me to graduate because I just hated studying, and I was working full time and studying on the side. And that it was part of the entrepreneurial spirit in me, was not to give up until I'd conquered it.
Right.
And that same mindset went through every single problem I had building the UGG brand for 17 years, is never give up, never give up. And I'm really grateful the fact that I did graduate, because I now have a gift of accounting and basic finance that I never would have had the advantage of running the business. So I as soon as I graduated, I quit the same day as I graduated. That's how much I wanted to get out.
Right.
And it was a couple of weeks thinking of what the hell can I do? I had this thought, all the great trends are coming out of California, waterbeds and Levi jeans and all the surf brands. And I thought, I'm going to go to California and find the next big thing and bring it back to Australia.
Well, you did go on to UCLA and you graduated from the School of Management there.
Well, I did courses at the grad school, the School of Graduate, the Graduate School of Management.
Right.
And they were in marketing, because it was an area where it wasn't very well known in Australia. Marketing had not really caught on, and it was fascinating. I loved every minute I spent in those classes.
Was that right?
Yeah.
So it was during, from what I read, it was during that time that you observed that there was no sheepskin footwear in the U.S. And of course, anybody who's been to Australia and New Zealand, we know there's a lot of sheepskin stuff.
Yeah.
But you know that story, the story of a guy who was sent by, or two guys who were sent by their two competing companies are sent to Africa. Two competing shoe companies are sent to a place in Africa, same place, and one of them phones back and says, send me back, nobody even wears shoes here, there's no point. And the other guy goes, send me everything you've got, nobody's got any shoes here.
Right.
It was a completely different mentality. You were like, I'm sure other people probably noticed, well, people don't wear sheepskin here, but they also probably went, it's California, why would they?
In fact, that's the most common thing I got when I tried to take all the samples around. They all just went, sheepskin? We're in California, you're crazy.
Right.
So it was knowing that all the Australians wore them, and the climate in California is exactly like Australia.
Right.
I knew that wasn't the reason. It was just they'd never been introduced to them.
Right, because, the logic doesn't stand up.
No,
right? The logic
and
is like,
Americans don't understand sheepskin like Australians. You know, we know it's rugged and you can get it wet and you can wear it when it's wet and it's warm and it never sweats. You know, how you said earlier you didn't want to smell the feet. Well, you don't sweat in sheepskin because it breathes, so they don't get sweaty and smelly. But, you know, in America, it's, oh, my God, it's hot, it's prickly, it's too delicate, we can't get it wet, we have mud and slush and snow. And so it was a huge, that, believe it or not, that was the biggest hurdle to the introduction of that product into the American market, was this absolute, unknowingness about the qualities of sheepskin.
Because today it's more prevalent than ever that marketing is also education.
Hugely amount of
right. So you've got to educate your customer that this is what they need. But you're really battling uphill if you've got to educate them not just on something new, but against a belief that they already have. That's a double whammy.
It was really difficult. Yeah. And the ultimate result was I was so frustrated at a trade show where this woman was from Wisconsin, and I thought, it's a perfect climate for sheepskin boots. And she goes, oh no, they're too hot and they're too prickly, and we have mud and we have slush and we wear rubber sorels, and I was so frustrated. I said, look, just take your sock off and put this on.
Right.
And she did it a bit, but she finally did it, and she went, oh my God. And that's the saying I've heard most. I've heard that thousands of times, because when she did that, she bought like 60 pairs right then and there, because they felt so good. And then I realized, oh my God, that was pretty powerful. And so from then on, I made sure every sales rep that I had insisted on the buyer actually trying one on before they asked for an order. And that was one of the hugest breakthroughs in sales. So
it was the puppy dog sales turbocharged.
Yeah, really.
It's just like, try it on. It on.
Yeah,
I mean, people always think it's a bit weird, but I actually really like sheepskin. And I've got a jacket, and people are like, it looks like it's from the 70s, but I just love it, and it's so comfortable. And it's, and people don't really get that. So it's really cool that you did that. So you noticed that the sheepskin world was wide open. You had $500 to start for capital. Tell us about the beginning.
Well, it was even before. We put together. Me and a buddy put together $500 and sent it down to get 6 pairs of samples from a factory that I saw advertising the sheepskin boots, and we went around to all the shoe stores, and they just laughed us off, like 150 shoe stores, and we didn't get an order there. But all of my friends up at Malibu, because I was surfing every day back then, and Malibu was always my dream spot to come to, and they nearly all had heard of sheepskin boots, and or had a pair because all the California surfers who went to Australia on their surf odysseys brought them back.
Right.
So within that surf community, they were pretty well known. And so we started going to the surf shops.
I see.
And all the buyers would go, "Oh my God, you're going to make a fortune. These are great, you know." And we were just testing the market with these samples. And, you know, my buddy and I just realized we were going to be instant millionaires. And so we raised 20 grand real quick, and we sent it down. We bought 500 pairs of boots in. And then we went back to all these surf shops, and they go, "Oh, well done. You know, you're going to do great." But we couldn't sell them out of our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and sandals, and you know, you should go to the shoe stores. And so from a week of going to every single surf and action sports store on the California coast, our first year's sales was 28 pairs.
Oh, so walk
exactly
us
$1,000.
Walk us through that, because you've gone out, you've borrowed 20 grand.
Right.
How many pairs did you say you got?
500. So we had 480 pairs left in the warehouse.
480 pairs of, and you've got to warehouse them now.
Well, the warehouse was my third bedroom.
Which was not sleeping anybody else, because that room would have been pretty full.
Yeah.
I want you to walk us through that, because for the entrepreneurs listening to the show, that is one of, and I know there's more, but that's one of those moments where you go, okay, I was on crack. Clearly, you know, we did not read the market correctly. We did not do our due diligence.
Yeah.
We got to pack it up. We got to ship these babies back. We got to do something to get rid of them, try and recoup some of the 20 grand. I'm sure at that point you're feeling like financial pressure as well as, you know.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I was super disappointed. And, you know, I guess I had a moral obligation not to give up, because my investors had, you know, all their money stuck there. And so I started going to swap meets and street fairs, and believe it or not, one of my best retail outlets was the back of my van at Malibu Beach, because I'd finished surfing, and I had a full run of sizes and colors in the van, and I had a regular clientele and people coming every day saying, "Yeah, my buddy bought a pair here. He referred me over here." You know, so it was like a little retail store in the parking lot at Malibu. And but the next year I sold about $5,000 or $6,000 worth, and so I decided I'm going to start advertising. So I hired models and photographer, and we shot them down at Windansea Beach with the perfect hair and the perfect clothing and the perfect sunset and the boots, you know, front and center, and the sales went to about 10,000 the next year. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get better looking photographers and better looking models, I should say, and a more expensive photographer. And we shot them again at the beach, you know, perfect hair and everything. And the sales went to like 20 grand. And I couldn't work out what I was doing wrong. And I was having a beer with one of my surf shop owners and explaining this problem. And he goes, "Oh, shut up, Brian." And he calls out the back to all these little 13-year-old grommets who, you know, used to sweep the floors there. And he says, "What do you guys think of UGG boots?" And every one of them came out going, "Oh, those Uggs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf." And instantly I went, "Oh God, I'm sending the wrong message to my target market."
Right.
And like within, you know, as any entrepreneur knows, you got to pivot real quick. So I had a buddy who was running a Scholastic Surf Association up in Orange County, and I said, "Pete, do you know any kids who are going to turn pro soon? Because I don't have much money." And he gave me these two young kids, Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. And instead of the expensive photographer, I just went surfing with them and shot these, you know, casual shots walking to Black's Beach down in La Jolla and Trestles up in San Onofre. And these are iconic surf walks. I mean, it's about a mile each way and a phenomenal surf at the end of it. And so I ran these ads in Surfer magazine and Action Sports magazine the next season, and sales went to 200,000 purely because I nailed the image, you know. Right. And for 3 years I'd been floundering, and that sort of leads to the theme of my book.
Yeah,
you can't give birth to adults. The theme of the book is you can't give birth to adults, and it's. It sort of describes a business in terms of a child, whereas, you know, first of all, there's the conception and the birth. You know, the birth of UGG was buying 6 pairs of samples. You know, it's the physical action that brings whatever it is into existence, right? And then it just is born, and it just lies there, and it lies there, and there's no amount of feeding it or jiggling the cradle or urging it. This infant can't get up and go to college. It has to be an infant.
Right.
But eventually it'll start toddling, which is a really cool stage, because, you know, your first customers are bragging about the product, and, you know, people are writing articles about you. And then that moves into the youth phase, which is that's the best phase of every business, because your sales are consistent, the production's consistent, the shipping and handling is great, you know, the customer service is working, and, you know, you can run a business to $20 million in that phase.
Right.
But if it's a really, really good product or service like UGG was, you're going to get dragged into the teenage years, and that's when it's super dangerous. You remember how you wanted to be at every party in town, you know, when you were a teenager? Well, it's the same sort of feeling. You want to be in every trade show. You want to be in every retail outlet.
Right.
And it's super dangerous because you outstrip your ability to finance so fast. But eventually the accountants put the controls in. So as desperate as that first 28 pairs was, I was just going through the cycle.
Sure.
And there were, I mean, I had 3 summer jobs for 3 years. You know, first year I was scrubbing boats at Marina Del Rey, and the next season I was construction worker in Bel Air in LA. And the third year I was a greenskeeper on a golf course, you know. So I did whatever it took to keep keeping on to make that business work.
You know, I really like this analogy you've used of, you know, you can't birth an adult in the context of a business. You can't.
Right.
Of course, it makes sense. And I love the way you phased it out so that people can understand these phases of the business that you're in.
Yeah.
And of course, in each of those phases, there are going to be challenges that, you know, as you said, even in that stage where it's all lovely and it's consistent, it's still possible to get sideswiped. One of the things
all the time, yeah.
One of the things that happened for you is you had a partner, right? You had a partner originally who was the sales guy.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that was a sharp left that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, he was going to be the sales guy. I was going to be the accountant because I was terrified of selling. But after that first season, it was obvious there was not going to be any money to get paid. So he had to go get another job, and I was the one left with the obligation to the shareholders. So eventually I had to sell. And I can remember how terrified I was going to the first surf shops, you know, to try and get orders. And I was always felt really embarrassed wheeling all my product into the trade shows, you know, right, to set up my little trade show booth. But something changed. And it was about 4 or 5 years. It was after we ran those ads and the surf shops were now like scrambling for boots every season. I was in a little store down in Encinitas, that's in San Diego, and I was fixing up the shelf. The owner wasn't even there. I was just in the store cleaning up all the sheepskin boots that were on the shelves because they'd all got a bit out of order, and making sure everything was right. And I was swapping out all the size 13s and 12s because it was the end of the season. I didn't want him to carry any product over into the summer. And so I was servicing that account like, you know, so well that the owner wasn't even there. And I treated all my customers like this. But I had this thought. I thought, oh, my God, you know, this guy has sold $60,000 worth of boots this year at wholesale. So that means he sold them for $120,000. So he made $60,000. And I thought, the rent on this shop is probably $3,000 a month, so that's $36,000 for the year. So there's another, $30,000 left over to pay a couple of people's salaries. And I thought, my God, he's paying all his overheads on just UGG boots. So that means every single thing else he sells in there is bottom line. And sales to me, like when I was an accountant, I had to audit car sales yards, and I was terrified of these salesmen. They were ruthlessly greedy.
They were car salesmen in Western Australia.
Oh man. and so I'd always had that as an image of sales, but now I realized, my God, I'm actually doing this guy a service. I am making him money, and I'm looking after all the product in the store. And I started to take that attitude into every single one of my retailers, and I taught my sales force. Like by the time I built this up to a big company, and we had 30 or 40 people on the road all over the country, and the mantra was, hey, you are doing these people a service by giving them UGG boots, so treat it that way. And so when sales stop being a get thing and being a give thing, the customer service became fun, and my interaction with every retailer became fun, and we were just, it was like a family, thousands of retailers, and I knew hundreds and hundreds of them personally.
I think that's I remember that from when we spoke off air. And that was something that really stood out for me, because I think, there are people, there's no doubt about it, there are people who naturally fall into sales, and it's very easy for them and they're very comfortable with it. But I think that for a lot of people, sales is a difficult psychological challenge, and because it does feel like this. It feels like my hand is out, and I need you to give me something.
I want the order,
and that shift, that's why I want to come back to it, because that shift that you had was that selling is giving rather than taking, is a fascinating shift. And I really like some guidance from you for our viewers, for our listeners, because I think one of the things I've spoken about many times, I've had actually other sales leaders on here, and I've spoken about this before, is today, whether you are a CEO, CFO, CMO, CIO, entrepreneur, speaker, author, whatever it might be, you have to sell.
Yeah.
So help them, like give them some direct guidance in getting over that hurdle in their own head about selling. How do you help them get over that? They're saying, I get it was great for you, but I don't know how to get over that hump.
No, well, number one, you have to believe in your product. If you don't, you'll never be genuine. And you have to believe that you can help somebody by giving them your product or your service. Okay? And once you have that belief, then it's just a matter of overcoming the fear of picking up the phone, which isn't so common these days. Like back when I was doing it, it was face-to-face or it was telephone. Now is so much easier because you can put your image first forward by internet.
Yes.
And the beauty of that is it doesn't matter if you're working out of your garage or a huge warehouse. Nobody knows the difference.
No.
Because if you can put your your Facebook page and the website together in a really beautiful way, people have no idea where you're shipping from, and so you can get your image out first, right?
Yeah.
If there is now a follow up, if it's a service, you like. The key thing is don't advertise your product, advertise the benefit, right?
So let's say that again, because I think that people have to grasp that. So
okay.
Don't advertise your product, advertise the benefit.
And you can switch the word advertise to sell. Like, don't sell your product, sell the benefit. And if you looked at those first ads that I did in the surf market, the boots were like 1/3 of the ad. They were that big because it was all front and center. The ad that worked was like this huge scene from a long distance, and the boots were like 1/8 of an inch big on the page. and the rest was all image, because the kids didn't want the boots. They wanted to walk down that path with Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. And so I created such an environment where I sucked the readers into that. So if you can manage that same feeling when you're selling, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face, where you're selling, hey, you can be part of this image. You can be part of the benefit of my product. If you have a software that saves time, you don't advertise a photograph of the software package. You advertise some guy in the Bahamas drinking a martini, say with all the time he's saving,
right?
And so it's a very subtle thing, but you have to draw your customer into the environment that you want, and that is what's in it for me. That's a really common sales phrase. What can I benefit from the product? And you have to have the answer. And if you love your product, you'll have the answer.
Yeah, I think that I think one of the dangers is that we fall in love with our products, and I think that's important. We fall in love with our product, but we assume everybody else will too, and that's where it falls down. It's important to love your product, but thinking everybody else will too is kind of foolish. And I think what you said there is very important for us to grasp, which is the understanding that you're not actually selling the product, you're selling the benefit or the gateway into a lifestyle. I mean, that image you just described, I have not seen the image, but it's really interesting to me because I created the image in my head as you were saying it.
Yeah.
And I created the image, and I put myself in the position of being a young surfer, and I want to be on that path. I want to be walking side by side with that pro who's going down there.
Yeah.
And psychologically, the link between UGG boots and being on that path becomes inseparable.
Very powerful.
And that is very powerful. So it's not just selling the benefit, but it's actually selling how your product aligns the dream that they're having.
That's correct. And I did that. I wanted to translate out of surf and how do I get into skiing? Well, I did the same thing with snowboarders. And then I got sort of stymied back in Wisconsin and Chicago and Minneapolis going, no one has ever read a surfer magazine here, So,
no, of course.
So I figured out that all the young kids play hockey. And, it's great. They have to change shoes when they get there. And their moms have to come and sit in the rinks and watch them. It's just freezing. So it was a natural for me to hit on, some young pro hockey players. And that really, so it worked all the way across the board.
Fantastic. So as I said, there have been significant adversities in you building that brand.
Yeah.
Talk to the leaders watching our show. How do you lead through that adversity? Because it's one thing to have a good attitude.
Yeah.
But it's a whole other thing to lead through adversity.
Yeah, you bring up some sort of sad memories, but they weren't sad. They were just difficult times. There was a period where one of my financing partners had died, and my manufacturer didn't think I was going to be able to save the company. And unbeknownst to me, for 4 or 5 months, he was plotting to find a different distributor. And meanwhile, I was out on the road selling, and I was sending orders down to him, 5,000 pairs every other week. Going, hey George, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to have a great season. And I would get these really wishy-washy replies back, have you found out how to finance it yet? And this went on through, March, April, May, June. And I knew we had to deliver in September, October, and I had to try and find an alternate source. And I ended up going to Australia and found a tannery, and this guy was super interested in helping us. He had 4 or 5 suppliers that he used, but he never did the deal with me. He was always a little worried that he was in Australia, I was in America. And so I got back to America, and I heard, hey, there's this, one of my reps told me there's this company out there selling sheepskin boots, and they're claiming they're going to, knock UGG off. and I looked them up, and they were a windsurfing company. I thought, who cares? I got bigger problems. And it wasn't until it got right up to the last trade show for September before we had to deliver, and I still hadn't got a supply organized. And I had like $3 or $4 million worth of orders sitting there. And we went to the trade show, and here's one of those things about how do you lead people through. This is one time I was sort of dishonest in a way. I didn't tell my sales reps or any of my staff that we weren't going to make it. Right. I was so like, defeat is not a real word until the second you give up, then you're defeated. And I wasn't ready to go there. And even though I had no idea where we were going to get product from, I still went into that trade show, and I went over and found this other company. They were called Thunderwear, which was this windsurfing company. And I got over near the booth, and oh my God, there were all of my boots from my previous supplier,
right?
All the new colors that I designed with these labels that said Thugs on the back, and that's when I knew I was defeated and I wasn't going to be able to pull it through. So I didn't tell anybody at the show. We wrote $250,000 worth of more of orders, which was like another nail in the coffin. But I had called my wife, and I said, next Monday we're going to call everybody and tell them to go buy the Thugs boots because it's our product anyway. And so when I got back home after the show, I made a call down to the guy in Melbourne who was a tannery. And, I thanked him for all the time he put in trying to help finance it. But I told him, on Monday we're going to pull the plug. And, went to bed. He was sad, but we went to bed. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and he goes, "Brian, it's Gordon. Screw those other suppliers. I'll make sure you get all the boots you need." And just like that, we were back in business. No handshake, no contract, no nothing. And I sent all the patterns down, and he duplicated them and sent them out to 4 or 5 manufacturers, and he cranked his tannery up to full production. And within about a month, we were getting 4,000 or 5,000 pairs a week coming in. And this happened every Friday night. We would get the 5,000 pair, or Friday morning. Saturday we were empty, and the next Friday another 5,000 pairs. Saturday empty, and our retailers were actually driving to get their boots. And there's a couple of funny things happens, but these things happen between Christmas and New Year. Number one, I'd sort of taken out a life insurance policy on my partner who was financing it. We took it out on each other, and it paid out, and it was just enough money to buy the business back 100%, right? But the second crazy thing that happened was the customs broker screwed up and shipped 2,000 pairs of Thugs boots to my warehouse and 1,000 pair of mine up to his. And we decided to swap them out because I needed my boots. And so I went up and saw his warehouse, and I was driving back to San Diego, and I'm thinking, how come we couldn't keep boots in stock for 24 hours? And his warehouse was jammed from floor to ceiling, and his warehouse was bigger than ours,
right,
full of sheepskin boots. And I just choked up. I thought, oh my God, my customers were so loyal that they wouldn't buy these Thugs no matter that they were, my product or anything. They had to get the UGG logo. And that was when I realized the power of all of those years servicing the customers and being one-on-one with them and just having a rapport with many of them I only met once, but we at least it was some sort of effort to establish a sort of a communication. And my customers would rather forgo millions of dollars worth of sales, which they could have done if they had bought the other product.
Sure.
But they chose not to do that. They stuck with me.
Yeah, because you said in the book, you talk about how you should have gone out of business, but it was your customers' loyalty that kept you in business.
It is amazing, yeah. And that sort of I don't know if that's a good leading of my staff and all my customers through that horrible event by not telling them, but it paid off. And now UGG is $1 billion brand, and it could have been non-existent.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Had I bailed at that time. And there were 2 or 3 other times I could have bailed too. But, just showing up. In fact, from my book, I have this great quote, which is, nearly always your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings.
Yes.
And it's uncanny how true that is.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that one.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I ask my audience every time, put your hand up if something's happened in the last 12 months, which at the time you thought was a disaster, and now you look back and think, thank God that happened. I would say 80% of every audience puts their hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of my presentation that I asked too, is, what was it that felt like a curse that became the blessing?
Yeah, that's
it's the same thing, right? It's that, because at the time, it feels all-consuming, and I think that for all of us who go through that, it's easy to look back and feel like it was a moment, even in the way you relayed that story. It's that moment when that supplier calls you and says, "Bugger them, we're going to do it anyway." But it's not a moment. It's a whole bunch of moments where you wrestle with your own doubt. You wrestle with throwing in the towel. You wrestle with, no, we can do this, we can get it. And that wrestling match is not 5 minutes. It's sometimes years.
Yes. And fear of the unknown is the biggest devil,
Absolutely.
And that's why a lot of people are not entrepreneurs. Their fears just cripple them. But a good entrepreneur will have the fear, recognize what it is, and figure out a way around it, or a way to deal with it. And that's, and a part of that just comes with time. Another quote I use from my book is that the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is live every day happily as a tadpole, because time changes things.
Yes.
And when you have a disaster, I'm so blasé about it now. I go, oh, damn it, that's good. Now, what's good about it?
Right. Yeah.
And you cannot believe how fast, when you take that attitude, you can't believe how fast you find a solution. And then 6 months later, you're looking back thinking, thank God that happened, man. I would never be here where I am.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We had a situation happen in our business, and it was devastating. I mean, financially devastating.
Yeah.
And I came home from the office one day, and my wife's like, she's upset, she's anxious, understandably. It was
sure.
Totally. And she said, "How do you feel about it?" And I said, "I'm totally where you're at. I'm in the anxiety, I'm in the stress and all of it." And I said, "But there's an overriding feeling that in contest with that." And she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Are you ready?" And she goes, "Yeah." I go, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last." And she goes, "How the hell can you say that?" And I said, "Honestly, babe, I have no idea. I don't know how I can say that. It doesn't make any sense. It seems crazy, but I know that something about this is going to set us free."
I've got goosebumps. That's great. Yeah.
But it felt like I'd been run over by a bus. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make any sense, and the battle is the crossing between those two states of free at last and, oh my God, I'm going to be crushed under the weight of this thing.
Right.
So it's a fascinating piece. You sold the business sold the UGG brand in 95. Like you said, now it's doing in the $1 billion. So what happened to Brian Smith after that? What was the next adventure?
Okay, well, I had a lot of money, as you can probably imagine, and it was like sort of going public without having to go public when I sold it. It was a really great deal. And I was sort of done because I knew it had to get big and corporate, and I can't function in those environments, where everything's by committees and protocols and that. So I was looking forward to getting something more entrepreneurial going, and I got invested in. I invented a lightweight concrete, which was half the weight of regular concrete, and married that up with the steel stud framing industry, which was just beginning to come out of AutoCAD machines and roll formers, which was a huge. Anyway, this was a breakthrough in construction, and we put up over 100 structures in Southern California in nearly 4 years, which was remarkable, and was doing great until 2009, and then the recession hit.
Right.
And that pretty much wiped out everybody who was in construction, and we had a huge factory manufacturing all this stuff that we couldn't sustain. So took a big hit on that.
Sure.
And during that downtime, I thought, I've always kept notes about the UGG story. And so I just sat down and wrote the book, The Birth of a Brand.
Right.
And it took on the format. I still had diaries from the day I started all the way through every year. So it was a pretty easy way to piece it together. And, I finished it in a few months, and what I didn't expect is that led me to the stage, because people would say, "You got a book? Oh, do you want to come on stage and talk about it?" And the first time I said, "Yeah," the first time I was asked, I said yes, never having thought about it, and that's when when I came off stage that first time and saw the impact that I had on all these entrepreneurs, I went, "Oh my God, this is powerful. How can I help more?" And so I've since become, a pretty well regarded speaker, and speaking on really big stages, all Australia here, next week next month the Bahamas, and Chile and Argentina. Oh, sorry, anyway, Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love to do, and I'm very effective at it. And, apparently I'm really good at it, which I love. But mostly the book is the lesson that it's a roadmap for entrepreneurs, but it's also great for any corporate executive who's been there, because they're going to recognize themselves all the way through the book. And it's very inspirational, in a lot of ways spiritual, because even though it's a business sort of book, it's more about how do you live personally while you encounter all of these issues.
Absolutely.
And no book, like you'd never learn this in business college. They'd never teach it in grad schools or anything. This is boots on the ground stuff that your real life is not work. Your real life is living. And how do you live a great life while you're going through all this crap,
Yeah,
and not just crap, great things as well. We had some fantastic things happen at UGG.
What is a problem or a challenge that you're currently, like I said, we've got leaders watching this, we've got entrepreneurs watching this, people in all kinds of backgrounds, and I'm evangelical about bringing people to say, you can't stop working on yourself, you can't stop working on your business. Yeah. What is a problem or a challenge that you are currently working on in your business?
Well, it's business and life. It's this, it's the media that's available now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you a funny story, but right back in the late 90s when we were just about selling the brand to the public company, I remember poking my head in my secretary's door and said, "Hey, Nikki, take down this letter." And I dictated a letter to her because she did shorthand, and she looked up at me and says, "Brian, you can do this yourself now, because we just put, computers on everybody's desktop." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, we have emails." And I just looked at her and I said, "Nikki, I'll never need to learn emails. I've got you." Right? Look how stupid that was in today's world, right? Well, now I'm facing social media and having that same sort of feeling like, oh my God, have I got to learn this?
Right.
And I know I do, because if I don't, I'm left behind. And I'm, even though I'm in my late 60s now, we're outliving our parents, by 10%, and my parents both died at 98. So, I mean, I got 30 or 40 more years statistically, and I can't not learn social media for that long. I'll be a dinosaur, and I don't want to be there. And I don't ever see myself stopping helping people, you know, in their businesses. So that's my biggest challenge, is sort of understanding how it all works, and then being able to utilize it in a way that makes it effective for me.
I think that's an important thing for all of us, is this. A lot of us, I mean, I speak to companies, to organizations, like you, from the stage, and, you know, and I speak about leadership, as you know, and we talk about multi-generational family business, and that comes into this generational issue.
Sure.
And so those senior leaders who are now in their late 50s, even 60s, who say, well, I just don't need that stuff. You know, let them worry about it. I'm like, you are already dead in the water with that attitude.
Yeah, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's death.
Yeah, and like, you got to keep on that ball all the time. And I feel my own resistance. It's like, oh, God, I don't want to learn this. So, can I hire somebody to do that? But the thing about it that I've learned is that yes, I do want to hire somebody to do those things, but I need to understand what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, because there are some things that you're just going to do anyway. And so you just have to have these things.
Yeah, well, we can pat ourselves on the back. You know, you're in Seattle, I'm in San Diego, and we're looking at each other. So,
I mean, it's amazing, right?
Millions of people are listening, so somehow we've sort of figured out a little bit of it.
Exactly, and it's ongoing. So I want to ask you a question now. You only get to put something short, and that's it. But there's going to be something on your gravestone. What do you want it to say?
Oh, he was loved.
Huh. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So now let me ask you this question. What's the one question that no one asks you that you wish they would?
This is twice as difficult.
Yeah, I know. The other one was a warm-up. You know, because you're doing interviews all the time. You're being asked questions from the stage. You stand there. You answer questions afterwards. And I know myself, people don't. There's certain questions that just don't get asked.
Yeah, I think because most people want to get something. What I'd love them to ask one day is, "Are you happy?" You know. That would be a nice one. That'd start a different dialogue than the normal dialogues I get caught into after stages and stuff.
Yeah, especially for someone like yourself who built such an enormously famous brand, everything gets framed in success and wealth.
Yes,
and those
there's
kinds
definitely an aura or a charisma that is present in their minds when they meet. Well, as soon as they say, you know, they know that, you know, that I started the UGG brand. Because, and that's sort of natural. We all sort of look at fame that way. But the beauty for me is I'm never put off by it, because it's the one brand in the world where everybody has an UGG boot story. Mm. I don't meet a person who doesn't tell me their story of their UGG boots. And there's very few brands in the world you could ever say that about.
Well, if you still own the brand, I'll give you a title for a book. I know you don't, but it's like UGG Boots for the Soul.
There you go.
Because everybody's got an UGG boot story. That's pretty cool.
That's funny.
So please, this has been great, and thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and your wisdom with everybody. Please tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, about the resources you offer, potentially bringing you in to speak or working with their organization. Great,
yeah, especially coming in to speak. That's really what I'm spending the next several years on for my mission. My website is Brian Smith Speaker. That's BRIAN smithspeaker.com, and you can contact me there. That's a website. In fact, I'm just sort of launching a new one this week, so it'll be pretty slick. And then if you're interested in the book, it's called The Birth of a Brand. and it's available on Amazon. You can pick it up that way.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so thanks. It's been really great having me on the show.
Great having you here. And I want to remind everybody, you can find out more about Brian at briansmithspeaker.com. briansmithspeaker.com. We'll certainly post that with the upload so you can get it. I want to thank Brian for being with us today. I want to thank him for great insights, great knowledge, and really, it was true blue, fair dinkum. Great to have you on.
It was just a good story time, yeah.
It was. And I hope you'll stay with us till the end. I want to thank all of you, dear viewers, dear listeners, for tuning in. I want you to remember that the research consistently shows that the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, that the fastest growing companies hit a point where they realize they're spending a fortune on attracting, training, and developing top talent, and they're also losing that talent at an alarming rate. So if you're sick of investing in training, development, and talent only to have them leave you before there's a return on your investment, then talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization, and assist you in reducing your employee turnover by as much as 20 to 80% in as little as 120 days, and really evaporating those costs. FullMontyLeadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills that get you and your organization to the top and keep you there, because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to stop by matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, Matrix like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, where you can get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool, valued at $197, absolutely free to you, for tuning in today. Matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Baron at fullmontyleadership.com, and of course at Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, saying stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what's over that hump, because maybe it's something spectacular. Have the courage and the fortitude to keep following your passion and your dreams. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am